Ms. Housefeld? Here. Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Here.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Here.
And Mr. Schildmeyer?
Present.
Let the record show 6 members are present, 1 member is absent. Members of council, what is your pleasure on the approval of the written minutes of the January 26th council meeting?
Mr. President,
Mr. Taberky,
a motion to approve the written minutes of the January 26th council meeting.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
a motion by Mr. Taberky, seconded by Ms. Housefeld to approve the written minutes of the January 26th council meeting. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. The next thing on the agenda is, I had put on the agenda last month, and we diverted it since the mayor took up most of the meeting last month. Just kidding, just kidding. Obviously, a lot depends on how the election goes with the charter changes, but it has been since 2008, since council, president council, mayor, other positions. I know, obviously, the appointed positions and elected positions, but since those may change, I put that on there for consideration. I mean, I'm not looking for anything to go nuts. I'm just, instead of the odd figures, so since 2008, council has been at $6,653. Simply looking to round that up to make life easier instead of the, and like I say, you have to do it before anybody files, and it's been almost, it'll be 16 years, I guess, when next council, and these raises would not take effect until 2024, or actually, if we change the charter to take effect December 2023, they would kick in then, so just throwing it out there, see what, it's not gonna bother me one way or another. It's, like I say, it's just been quite some time, and thought I would bring it up to get council's feeling. Guess that,
Mr. President,
Mr. Ray Culbertson.
it's just kind of difficult sitting up here and saying that. Like, how do you do it where you don't sound, I don't know, say greedy, or I don't know what the right word is, but it's hard to do it. And I know we wouldn't be doing it for us right now, but it would go for the upcoming election. So something that should definitely be considered.
Just for perspective, in the 40 years that I've been involved, so when I was elected in '83, council made $3,000. So over 40 years, we've had a $3,600 increase on council. So I don't think, and I'm looking 300 and something dollars. If you round the 66 up to 7,000, you're talking $347. So I mean, it's not going to set the world on fire. Nobody's going to quit their job to take a council job. And I'm just saying, you can't do it while you're in term. So that's the only reason I brought it up. So as I say, in 40 years, council's pay has increased $3,600, not setting the world on fire. So just as a point of reference.
Mr. President,
Mr. Taberky.
I view this position as a community service. The money's a nice little bonus, but I'm not making a living off of this or anything, so I probably won't be here next time, but I've got to just leave it like it is.
Anyone else, or we'll let it be? Like I say, it's not the end of the world. I just simply brought it up since it's been so long. I'll
Mr.
take
President,
Mr. Schildmeyer.
yeah, I do think, we're talking about a lot about trying to get some interest, more interest in having people run. Part of that, I would guess, has something to do with some level of compensation. So, I guess I would support it. Not, again, it does feel odd to say you're going to vote yourself a raise. That never feels good, I don't think. But at the same time, I think, the cost of living is 2 to 3% a year, which means these are basically going down every year, 2 to 3% if they stay stagnant. So I would support it.
And you've got to remember, you're not voting yourself a raise because none of us may be here next year. All depends on the election. And that's what I'm saying. You have to do it for an incoming new council. It will not take effect until, if the changes go into effect, December 1st of next year. So, like I said, Mr. Bob Culbertson.
We have other elected positions, whether it's the auditor Mr. President,
Ms. Brickway.
even though I'm not on council, I'm going to give my input because I was on council. What you're making now is what I was making when I was on council, but I was also meeting 4 times a month. You're meeting twice a month. Most meetings are a half an hour to an hour, wouldn't we say? So you're making $554 a month for a 1-hour meeting, or, you know, two-hour meetings. That's a pretty good hourly rate, you know, $200 and something an hour. Now, I know once in a while there's extra meetings, but there have not been extra meetings in a very long time. So that's just my personal opinion. Secondly, it's really hard to sit here. I've been in this job for 12 years. You know how much of a raise you guys gave me? 12 years, 2%. So, and that's just me. And I do it because I love the job, the same way Mr. Taberky. Yes, I pay bills with it, and it is my full-time job. So, I'm trying to pay a lot of bills with mine. But I could make more money in a different job, but I absolutely love what I do, and I love working for the village, so that is fine. But you have a lot of people that in their full-time job, and I mean, can you guys imagine in your full-time job getting a 2% raise over 12 years? Social Security was 8% this year. So I will say, just talking to different people around just City Hall in itself, everybody's like, wow, that's nice. They're going to give themselves a raise when they make almost $200 and something an hour. So I totally believe when I ran for council, it had nothing to do with the money. It didn't, and it still doesn't. I mean, Mr. Brickway used to laugh at me because I did so much work. I only made a dime an hour. But I did it because I loved it. And so I just think especially going down to 2 meetings, and as Mr. Asbach said about the 6,000, we're close. St. Bernard is not the top of council meetings, but you're like the 4th highest. So I don't think that you're underpaid. But I just think as you consider doing the raise, you really need to think about the way you've treated a lot of people from them. And for Mr. Culberson, welcome to our life. That's how you get a raise. You got to come here on TV and beg for it and hope somebody gives it to you. It's kind of sad how we operate around here, but maybe that's why I didn't really get one, because I never did that. But it is what it is. But I would like you to consider that you're only meeting twice a month now, and you can say you can go back to 4, but that doesn't make sense if there's not any added work. What are you just going to meet just
Right.
to make more money? But that's just my personal opinion on why I did it. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Taberky.
not to bash Peg anything, but a lot of us do more than just come to meetings. I mean, we're phone calls all hours of the night, mornings. To say we're making $200 an hour, it's kind of a cheap shot in my view.
Okay, Mr. President,
Well-
I understand that. I'm sure you do, and a few people do. But let's be honest, even if you're taking a lot of phone calls, do you think you're working more than, let's not go. I think we all know. I was on council for 8 years, and I took all the phone calls and stuff, and I know exactly what's involved. So I felt very comfortable saying what I did. So maybe I'll lower it to you make $200 an hour. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Brickway.
I think there needs to be something set. I don't know how you're tied, but there needs to be a structure that people don't have to sit up here and go over this. And I don't know the answer to that, I'm too new, but there has to be a solution that every 5 years, every 3 years, 1%, 0.5%, something should be structured so that people that are elected aren't sitting up here asking for a raise. That needs to be looked into, I guess.
Mr.
Mr.
President.
President,
Hang on.
in
Mr.
years
Taberky.
past, the council, mayor, everybody's salary was tied to the county commissioner's salary. They went without a raise for maybe, 10, 12 years maybe? And people got mad, and they did away with that. Some people got a raise, some people did not. So that, we were tied to the county commissioners at one point in time, and that was done away with.
Mr. President?
Hang on, Mr. Brickway. Ms. Brickway.
No, and Don is right on that. So people weren't getting a raise, so then council voted to take it away from that so they could get a raise. That's exactly right. But on the other part of that, there was that council probably does not realize, the state auditor did not like that. Reason being is every time they came in here to audit, it was pulling tooth and nail to get the salaries and try to get the comparison from the county commissioner. So they didn't like that. They didn't like that we were tied to somebody else that had nothing to do with us. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So they were actually happy. But on the other aspect, Mr. Brickway, as you say, like the 1 or 2% every year, we talk about it all the time. And at one point, most of the appointed jobs in City Hall, we were supposed to get a 2% raise every year, and it was supposed to be based on the cost of living, but then the council in 2012 voted that down.
Mr. President,
Mr. Brickway.
I mean, if the county auditor having a problem looking at one benchmark, the heck with him. I mean, seriously.
Well, how about if we do this then? How about if we'll just sit tight now and after May when we see, and the only reason I didn't bring up the auditor, the treasurer, the safety service director, because if the charter changes go through, those positions will no longer be here. I wasn't snubbing anyone, just for the record. Same with the director of law. You know, if the charter changes go through, those positions are gonna be redone. That's why I thought that this may tie in. So I'll just put it on the burner and we'll bring it back up after May, because it has to be, that's the whole problem with the elected positions. These raises have to go into effect before anyone files to run for those positions. So that's why I was doing it in the beginning of the year, so.
Mr. President,
Ms. Housefeld.
doesn't it have to be done before anybody goes to get their applications to run, or is it to file?
I believe it's before they file.
Okay,
Like you say, you used to go in January.
yeah. well,
You'd never get a raise if it was when somebody took petition, or took, what do you call it, out, so.
Mr. President,
Ms. Brickway.
I'm sorry. Yes, Ms. Housefeld, it's to file. And I gotta say one thing, but Tommy, the fire alarm's going off. Yeah.
I didn't hear it.
Oh, trust me. It's not that one. We have our own little one that's going off. What I was even thinking is, is like somewhat of a compromise. If you really do believe a raise, I would suggest a 3.5% raise, since that's what you just gave all the part-time employees. I would think that would be more along the same scale, because that's what a lot of the departments received. So if I was going to recommend a raise, which is not my job to recommend a raise, I would say a 3.5% raise seems very fair since that's what everybody else got. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Ms. Housefeld.
since everybody said their two piece, I wanted to say mine. When I started, I did it because I love this community and I wanted to make a difference and be hopefully some common sense up here to look at all sides of the pictures and then vote the way it needs to be voted. I agree with everybody that spoke. I mean, I don't think anybody is up here, maybe with the exception of me because of my circumstances, but I don't think anybody's up here expecting to make their whole living. But with the cost of living, with the cost of everything that has went up over the last few years, especially now, and we haven't had a raise forever. And I say we, it's not we, it's who's ever going to run and whoever's going to get elected. So we got to take that out. We're not giving ourselves a raise. We're giving the position a raise for whoever's going to be here next year. And so I would be for looking at some sort of a raise. Thanks.
Mr. President,
Mr. Ray Culbertson.
I also like Kurt's idea, though, of somehow taking it out, like, we've always been told we're up here campaigning for years, not yourself, but for the next election, but in some are, a good chunk of us hope to be up here still. But yeah, I like Kurt's idea of somehow tying it into something or, yeah, I don't know. It's difficult.
Mr. Brickway, or I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Mr. Brickway, Ms. Brickway.
To what he said, what Mr. Brickway said. The problem with that, and that's the same thing, is why they decided not to do it in 2012. They were like, what happens if we have a lot of bad years and it's in an ordinance? So that's why that was taken away then and why it didn't continue on. So as a suggestion, if you all believe in in you know what I mean. If you're all in agreement with the raise, it would seem like it would be more standard. Just do the 3.5 like you gave everybody else, and that to me feels like it's across the board. So if you want to vote on that or think about that, but I would think that kind of solves what everybody's kind of saying here. And I think you would find a lot, people would think it's pretty fair since the other people got 3.5% raises also.
All right, let everybody think about it. I'll keep bringing it up, whether it be next month or May or June, but there's nothing that has to be done right now. I just kind of wanted to, it's never a comfortable conversation. So as I say, it'll be 16 years since there's been raises. So that's the only reason I brought it up. So to be visited again. All right. Next thing on the agenda then is a discussion for to place an ordinance on the table for codified updates to our ordinances that Heidi passed along to everyone.
Mr. President,
Mr. Taberky,
make a motion for ordinance 5/2023 on the table next council meeting.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
motion by Mr. Taberky, seconded by Ms. Housefeld to place a ordinance on the table to update our codified ordinances. Are there any remarks? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. We'll move to reports of administrative officials. Mayor Stuchel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last night, I met with the representatives from the St. Bernard Elmwood Place School District regarding the creation of the SRO position. Our 2-hour meeting was very productive as we went through the MOU page by page, making some modifications and minor changes to wording to come up with a draft that both parties should be satisfied with. I truly appreciate the energy that has gone into this collaborative effort. I will have an updated draft for you all on council once their board approves the language. And I am asking that we have a special COW meeting before the next regularly scheduled council meeting so that we can have an ordinance on the table. Our goal, if approved, is to have the SRO position staffed for April and May of this school year before the actual move to the new building takes place. So I would like to actually try to have a special COW again before our next regularly scheduled meeting. And I will have your copies and your drafts of the MOU, so you'll have plenty of time to review it beforehand, because they will be having a special meeting themselves. So I would like to have that scheduled, and I guess would the suggestion be, if we were going to do that, from a timing standpoint, that we have the COW starting at 7 and then go into the regular council meeting after?
Are you anticipating a long period of time for the COW, special COW?
I mean, probably, 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes at the most. I can't, I think there would probably be representation from the school board that would be here and would be able to answer any questions, or if there were, if council had a question of them. So I can't imagine being over 30 minutes, truthfully. I think that would even be long, but I don't know, what would your suggestion be?
Any thoughts from council, or?
Mr.
Keep it at
President,
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
I mean, if all the details are in the agreement, I wouldn't think it'd take more than 15 minutes. But if you want that buffer to be safe and start the council meeting at 7:30, that's fine, but I would hope in 15 minutes would be suitable.
I would like to, Mr. President, I would like to think so myself, but
Obviously, a call command will go out and inform everybody, though. I guess we'll need a motion to do a special committee of the whole meeting at 7 PM on the 23rd then?
These calls me, you don't have to,
So we'll just start with committee, okay.
but you have to give specific times for the council meeting since you're moving it.
Or we do like we do with other things, we start the council meeting, make a motion to suspend the regular business for a special committee of the whole,
Sure,
and do
we'll
it
do it.
that way. We've done that for presentations, so, okay. All right. Anything else?
yes, actually, I do have another item, and I don't know if this obviously can be resolved this evening, but I have had residents that have called asking that we allow for chickens in the village. So, I mean, and they're being serious. So I said I would definitely look into that. I know that based on what Cincinnati has, you can have chickens, but you can't have a rooster. Whether or not council would be willing to look into this. I mean, this is a serious request, and I mean, I guess, whether or not it could be justified based on the cost of eggs right now. But I mean, the residents are legitimately asking if it could be done. I don't think it's so much asking, is it legal because their neighbor has it, but these people have asked me, not because it's a problem, but asking because they're interested in doing this.
Mr. President.
Mr. Bob Culbertson.
Jonathan, I think Don, you might have put it on there. We currently have an ordinance against any farm animals in the village property, right? Okay. And then I'm assuming they're asking for a certain number of chickens, or is they just saying, let council kind of decide?
So I think they're asking for consideration
Okay.
and some discussion because they know of what our current ordinance states. So I think what is being asked is, again, to try to give some consideration to see what might be a workable solution or something that might be allowed so that a modification could be made, whether or not, again, you put a limit on the number of chickens, whether or not you put limitations saying that, no, they can't be free range. But I think that they're asking for some discussion and dialogue to see if it is a possibility and whether or not, again, council would be willing to give some thought to this.
Mr. President,
Ms. Brickwood.
hopefully, maybe Mr. Taberky can help me with this, because the reason I think, no, just my personal opinion is, do they smell? The chicken coops, I don't want to live next to a house that has a chicken coop and a pig, and you know what I mean? I'm just worried about the odor. It's the one main thing I'm thinking about right now.
Why are you asking me?
Because you have a farm. You have a farm. Do you have any chickens on your farm? I don't, or if anybody knows. I would just assume they smell like a farm animal, but.
Just like anything else, you don't maintain it, it'll smell. If you leave the chickens out there and don't clean up after them, I know some, belong to a couple of organizations, they suggest cleaning the chicken coop out every day. If you don't do it, you will get an odor. You gotta worry about cats, dogs getting in there, ripping up your chickens. Looking at the cost of feed in that, if you're doing it just for the eggs, it ain't worth it. Once you buy the chicken, buy the feed, you got to supply light in the winter for them to lay eggs. It just ain't worth it unless you got a big time operation. Most feed stores, you got to buy 4 to 6 chickens or chicks. I don't know how many you're thinking about letting people have. It's not cheap. It's not a
Mr.
cheap way to do
President,
it.
can I clarify something? So again, I didn't really come here with a number of chickens that I was proposing for each resident. I came here because some people legitimately actually reached out to me. I guess I could have said, well, why don't you reach out to one of your council members? But I did not. I legitimately came forward because they asked. So, and none of them actually said they'd like a minimum number. This was just a legitimate question whether or not council would be willing to revisit what was put in place. And again, starting a discussion. I know this may appear to be a joke, but this was serious discussion.
Mr. President,
Ms. Brickwood.
I was actually on council when it was discussed last time, and it was put into that ordinance. And it basically, that's what part of the problem was the obnoxiousness of noise and smell and people complaining with people who had them. And so that's why we did it then. If I'm just giving my personal opinion as a resident, I do not want that next door to my house. I think if somebody wants to have chickens, they can go out on a farm or in a rural area, but this is a city area, and that's just my personal opinion. I would not want my neighbors to have them. And I like fresh eggs, but no.
Mr. President,
Mr. Taberky.
first hens usually just cluck. Roosters are the one to do all the crowing. And believe it or not, I saw on a web page today, they do make diapers for chickens now. Because a lot of people have chickens in their house. In their house, yes.
Mr. President,
That's not in
Brickwood.
Kentucky.
so talking about the chickens, I'd like to see the HIP inspector come back in town, just take care of properties, much less add chickens to them.
So just for some direction for the mayor, is council willing to look into this ordinance, or are we gonna let it as is? Sounds like nobody's.
President,
Mr. Taberky.
I would suggest we get some more information. How many, they talking 1 or 2 chickens? No roosters? You still have a problem. What happens if the neighbor complains that they're not taking care of them, that stinks, but yet they're allowed to have them? There's a lot of what ifs in there.
Mr. President,
Mr. Ray Culbertson.
Tommy, I hate to put you on the spot, but do we already have some known instances around town where this is going on? And Do we, if so, are we getting those complaints? Are we,
The original Mr. President,
Paul.
the original complaint happened 2 years ago, and when Robert Evans went up, it was immaculate, and we couldn't find any chickens. The person on the adjacent street was the one complaining. So with that, it was reported, we wrote it up, the police went up, they couldn't find any chickens, it was immaculate place, and it's still there, but now they're telling me that there's chicken visible, but I haven't seen that. The other thing council wants to keep on mind also is when you have chickens and you're talking how many, there's an ordinance out there that you're only allowed to have 4 pets per household. So if you make them pets, you know, so I don't know, you're in a hard place here.
Mr. President, at least that generated a little more discussion than your raise, so, but anyhow, I was just trying to have a little distraction here from that, so, but anyhow, that's all I had, thank you.
I was trying to buy some extra eggs and can't do it now without a raise, so. That's it for you then? Auditor Ms. Brickwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Like I just said to the mayor, if we have chickens, I would like a goat, so we'll just leave it at that. I want a little pet goat. If they get chickens, I get a goat. Okay. What I have on the agenda tonight is when I say there, Chris Sauer has been working, and Paul Schulmeyer, Tommy Paul, Mayor Sushel on different grants. The first grant, let me see, they went out for, they're with We Thrive. We did receive $3,000 from that grant, and if we purchase what I'm about to tell you, we'll get another $750. Their goal was to purchase a 12 by 16 stage. So then when we're having smaller affairs, they don't have to put up the real big stage. It would include panels with guardrail steps and a skirting on 3 sides. The cost of this is $8,295.79. Since we've already received $3,000 of it, and we're going to be getting another $750, I was asking council for an additional appropriation of $3,545 into 0158.9, which is community events, because that's pretty much what we'll be using it for. It's brand new, pretty good investment, and I know the mayor in his budget wants a lot more community events and bands, and this would just, it'll probably pay for itself in just man-hour putting it together. So they were scrambling, trying to find it in the budget, so I said I would bring it to you to see what you think if you would allow the additional appropriation. Another grant, same thing, that they're getting ready to go out for. We just found out about it 2 days ago, and it's due next Wednesday. But they've all met together and they're working on it, is an ICB audio and video system at the pool and the pavilion. They can probably explain a little better, but basically a whole sound system. They've met, Chris met with somebody, they're waiting to get the cost, but this grant is $7,500 to $15,000. So their hope is that it'll hopefully pay for itself. But he just wanted me to inform council that they're going after that grant also for the pavilion. And on one final note, just so you know, there's a new law out there, and we need to send some of our service department for a CDL license. Now there's a new CDL law. And so Tom used $3,400 out of the professional services because we had not budgeted for that, and that's how much it costs for the class. He should be fine for the rest of the year, but I just wanted to give you a heads up in case he needed an additional appropriation. And then finally, you all received an email that we're having a special audit next week on the Ohio Police and Fire. Basically, they just pick and choose. Last year we had a special audit on our Bureau of Workers' Comp. And so they're going to come in and audit that. I'm ready for them, but that will cost us $600 for that or a little bit more. So they choose us, and then we have to pay them more money to do it. But that will be next Tuesday, and I'll let you know the outcome after he's done with that audit. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mayor Stupi.
so just to touch back on the stage, So this actual stage we can add to it if we find that we need a larger. It actually works out well because 2 employees can set it up. And this actually works out well for us as well, being able to utilize this stage in the pavilion, which is, it's not conducive to set up the large stage inside. And with our expanded summer concert series, which will be announced, our goal was to have that actually in place and be able to use it as soon as possible. And we started with that size. Actually, it was proposed that we go with the smaller. I didn't think it, was going to work, so we actually bumped the size up a little bit. But again, we might be able to, as time goes on, there's other things that we can add to it. We can actually add sections, and it's something that would work for us very well. The current large stage that we have, truthfully, actually needs to be replaced. But we wanted to start small with something that was more manageable, and down the road, whether or not we need to look at a larger scale stage or just going to the idea of potentially renting a larger stage when needed. But this would work out well for our summer concert series, and it's not something that is so labor intensive to set up like the current one that we have. And the grant that was awarded actually, this, I think that's it's again for community use. So hopefully this would work, and I think it's going to be a manageable option.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke.
make a motion to put an ordinance on the table for next council meeting for additional appropriation for the stage.
I'll second that.
A motion by Mr. DeBerke, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to place an ordinance on the table for additional appropriation. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Anything else? That's it? All right.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke.
when we talk about the sound system for the pavilion, are you going to remodel the pavilion? There's talked about in the budget, there's money. I mean, if we're going to put a sound system in there, I think we ought to do something with the pavilion first.
Mr. President, so yes, actually this week met with a contractor, so it's my intention to actually, I would call restore the pavilion, but it is one of our greatest assets that we have. We are going to resurface the pavilion. The goal is to raise the pavilion to a consistent level so you don't actually have the drop down. It would all be consistent. That should help take care of the drainage issue. The goal would be is after it is raised and completely resurfaced, it will have the necessary coating put over top of the non-skid coating put on for the basketball courts. But there will be 2 indoor basketball courts, and my plan is to add 2 indoor pickleball courts. So we would have 2 and 2, so that the area could be utilized. My intent is to also have the pavilion painted, so we're getting bids on that as well. It needs to be sandblasted and actually painted, and then we're also getting the roof fixed in the corner where it leaks. So, that is to me, that is one of our biggest gems that we have, and it has been something that, maintenance has been deferred on that for a lengthy period of time, and it is time to bring that back to snuff. So yes, we are looking at repairing that, but we also wanted to, at the same time, with the expansion of our community events that we hope to have, the sound system itself would be better utilized, being consistent throughout the pool and that area. So it will get good use, and hopefully, again, we can all enjoy that massive structure for many years to come that has become a little unsightly, so it does need some true improvements. But yes, that is all in the works in this last week. And we will be, able to come back to you once we have the bids and let you know what we can do and when we could possibly start on that. But so aside, there are multiple things in the village that we need to bring back up to, a better standard. So, but that is a place that gets a lot of use, and we want to be able to have it a little more usable and offer. And we did have requests about pickleball. That wasn't just a joke either. I mean, there was we have 1 pickleball court down at the tennis courts, but it's a dual line court, so it is a little confusing. But the whole idea would be to have something with shelter if need be. It's become popular enough, and people go out of the village to play pickleball, and the idea would potentially be able to start a pickleball league. So if any of you are interested, but that's a thought.
Thank you. Law Director, Ms. Van Valkenburg.
Thank you. You should have before you ordinance number 4, which I prepared for you, and I'd like to have it placed on the table for the next next council meeting. It is an ordinance regarding the parking lot easement up adjacent to the pub. As you will recall, the owners of the property came up last month and discussed it. I've prepared the ordinance. It's got the attached vacation of parking easement and then the release. And if you want to take a look at it and you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I would like to have that put on the table for the next next council meeting. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke.
make a motion for ordinance 4, 2023 on the table next council meeting.
Second that.
A motion by Mr. DeBerke, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to place the vacation of the easement ordinance on the table for the next meeting. Are there any remarks? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke.
since we're doing this, when the owners came down and talked to us about it, they said there were some people in the apartments parking there extended periods of time. The parking lot next to West Banco, I know it's only 20-minute parking in the whole area. That lot is empty most of the day except for release and drop-off times. I know you wanted that for the coffee shop. Is there any way we can do half of that parking lot, 20-minute parking, the other half, you can park as long as you want?
Mr. President,
Mayor.
so it wasn't for the coffee shop specifically, it was for the business district. It was also for St. Clement, for people coming in to the office and not having a place that they could park for a short period of time because the teachers were utilizing that lot exclusively. So, you know, I guess if you're asking to have part of it released, I mean, I say no, because, you know, you've got the same, we need to give consideration to all the businesses. It's not just the coffee shop. We also have the Mediterranean restaurant. So if we don't leave parking for them, there's no guaranteed way that they can actually have clientele, you know, come and go, because they're not going to go down to the lot, you know, closer to, you know, back behind La Rosa's. I don't see the issue with it. You know, we also have another municipal lot that is across the street. So if those residents from the apartments, I mean, they could do one of two things. They can go on down, park in the lot behind La Rosa's. They can go across the street in the other lot that's there as well. It doesn't have a time limit on it other than the 48-hour maximum. I mean, I think 2 hours is generous. I mean, and whether or not we rework that 2 hours, you know, from such and such time. Maybe you do allow for overnight parking from said time, but they would have to be moved by morning. But I would not want to actually take away what we have right now during the day. That would be my opinion. But I mean, it's open for discussion, but you know, again, the whole idea was to support the businesses up there as well.
Mr. President.
Mr. Bob Culbertson.
I agree with Jonathan. I mean, we have the two businesses there, and then you also have Gestures that just recently. So, you know, I think you do have the need for, you know, to have some sort of restriction so, you know, it doesn't become an issue. I know the Mediterranean place and my dad's place before that, that was their biggest issue, was no customers were coming just because they couldn't find a parking spot up there for the lunch hour. So yeah, I would be in favor of just leaving it as is. And
All right, thank you. Treasurer, Mr. Unruh.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening I have the statement from Star Ohio with the funds that we have with them. Excuse me. At the end of January, the village's total there is $12,527,310.46, and I'll have copies for the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Safety and Service Director, Mr. Poe.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Thank you. Is there a report from the tax administrator? Anyone? Nope. At this time, we'll move to reports of standing committees. Finance, Mr. DeBerke.
No report.
Thank you. Safety, Mr. Brickway.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight I have the a little report on how the police patrolling Elmwood is going. We have a report for January. Billable hours for the month of January are 422 and a half, and the billable rate is, they've put it in the middle of patrolmen's, and it's time and a half. The billable rate is $59.07. Also, the fire department for the month of November has received $1,400 for paramedic runs into Elmwood. And that concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Service, Ms. Hausfeld.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Public improvements, Mr. Bob Culbertson.
Thank you, Mr. President. CIC will meet this, February 28th at 6 p.m. in council chambers. And don't forget, if you're interested in the lawn mowing contracts, to get your agreements in or your proposals in to Heidi at City Hall. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Marketing, Mr. Ray Culbertson.
Thanks, Mr. President. The next St. Bernard Little Grove Historical Society program will be on Monday, February 20th at 7 p.m. in the main level of the municipal building. Also, please make plans to join the Garden Club on Tuesday, February 14th at 6 p.m. in Centennial Hall. There are still a couple of beds available in the community garden for 2023. If interested, please contact Ken Price at Kenneth Price, KENNETHPRICE 916 at yahoo.com to reserve your spot. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Business and industry, Mr. Schultmeyer.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. This time, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council this evening? Please state your name and address for the record.
Matthew Durbin, 36 Baker Avenue. I noticed you mentioned the policing of Elmwood. I remember before the last meeting there was a mention of the contract that was going to be written up for us to view. Whatever happened to that?
Mr. President,
Mayor.
so that is in the works. So the contract itself still has to be reviewed by legal counsel from both ourselves and the Village of Elmwood Place. So that hopefully by the next meeting, committee of the whole meeting, we would have that. But right now, it's being done in a detail. And as I said, it's a supplemental patrol, which they are paying. So it's in addition to what we already have on duty right now.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address council?
About having a was read about money. What?
I think I know what he's at, Mr. President.
Mayor.
Tom, you're asking about Crosley's?
Yes.
Okay. So what is happening with Crosley's, I can explain. So obviously the bar is closed. We have, the CIC actually had an auction and sold the items that were left. As far as the majority of the memorabilia that was actually in the bar itself was taken by, owners, previous owners. So what was sold were, fixtures, kitchen items, some remaining memorabilia. But as far as the majority of the items that anyone specifically wanted were taken before that actually happened. So what was taken, sold were, stools, some tables, chairs, kitchen equipment, and some of the remaining items that were still, like beer signs and that kind of thing. But that was really all that was there. I mean, basically the place is trashed. And was trashed beforehand and is not in any better state. But as far as personal items or anything like that, there isn't anything there. I'll be glad to even take you down there if you want to look at it sometime. But it's completely trashed.
About shot baseball and pass. About a shot told me a new owner about crucible and talk me.
Mr. President? I think what, Tommy, you're saying that you had asked me who was going to buy it and what was going to happen to it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, and I think at the time I said it's, the CIC owns it, and it will likely be part of the larger development.
Correct. So if, and what, yes, that area is going to be redeveloped. So unfortunately, the building is at some point going to be demolished. And I will flat out tell you, it is in disrepair. It is not a building that is salvageable. It's not even cost effective to try to white box it to make it even rentable. There are enough issues with the building itself that it is not desirable for future use.
One more thing is so wet inside.
Mr. President,
Mayor.
did you say it being wet inside? Is that we did have a recent water line break, and yes, there was a substantial amount of water that actually did end up going down into Crosley's, but I can pretty much assure you that it didn't make it any worse than it already was. So, I mean, yes, we dried it out, but there wasn't anything further other than some ceiling tiles that were damaged that came in, but you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference or not. In fact, it may have even cleaned it up a little bit.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Anyone else in the audience? All right. What is council's pleasure on the excuse the absent member?
Mr. President,
Mr. Ray Culbertson.
make a motion, we excuse the absent member.
I'll second that.
A motion by Mr. Ray Culbertson, seconded by Ms. Housefeld to excuse the absent member. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. So I show 3 ordinances then for next week, or next council meeting. Ordinance for the updated codified ordinances, additional appropriation, and ordinance for the vacation of the easement at the St. Bernard Pub. At this time, I want to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Mr. Ray Culbertson.
make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Ray Culbertson, second by Ms. Housefeld to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.